Hey again, everybody. It's me, back again from my floor. I still haven't figured out a good solution to not being super uncomfortable after doing this for a long time, but it'll get there when it gets there, I suppose. Um, Let me look at this thing. Where was I? Is this even the right way? Yeah, okay, great. I have a pattern pulled up in advance this time, unlike last time, which is good. Proud of myself for doing that. Um, I honestly have no idea what I'm going to talk about today. I just was thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? It's been about a week. I want to try to do at least one of these a week, even if I have nothing to say. Um, so we'll see what comes out. Um, as I keep trying to remind myself to say, check the description. I'll put any content warnings or notes or whatever in there um, about what I do end up rambling about today. Um, in case it's distressing for you, please remember to practice self-care. And it's okay if you need to give it a miss because you're uncomfortable with what I'm going to be talking about. No harm done. Um, Let me see. I think last time I ended up just ranting a lot about like dissociation, which was good. I liked that a lot. It actually helped um, encourage me to finish that EP that I may or may not have mentioned. Um, this isn't like a promo or anything, but I'll probably end up putting a link to that in the description as well in case anybody's interested because I feel like art as processing is something that needs a little more awareness. Um, if you do happen to watch this and then also feel inclined to check that out, I do have to warn you that it's probably not very likable music. I'm a person who really enjoys, like, noise, non racist black metal, um, power violence. You know, if those words don't mean anything to you, I don't know, you might not like them. But for the people who do like those genres, I've heard that it's pretty good, which has been a nice little ego boost that I did not expect. But it's not very long. It's like 15 minutes. Um, and I accidentally made a vaguely black metal track by accident, but most of it I would classify as kind of like dark ambient electronic um, music. So that's there. Um, I will say this though, if you are a person who dissociates a lot, it may trigger you into that state. Um, if you are a person who deals with like cues and stuff, um, the thematic link among all the songs and the text is from a piece of popular fiction that may be very cueing. In fact, I know is pretty cueing for a lot of people. Um, it's a piece of popular fiction about a little blonde girl who ends up in another plane of existence that is very strange. Um, I don't know. I don't want to use words that could be cueing, but if you know if it's something that you needed to know, you probably understand what I'm talking about. Um, so just get that out of the way, but that'll be in the description. It'll be like, oh, here's how one random lunatic on the internet decides to try to process some of their stuff. So there you go. Um, Also, I'm sorry if the word lunatic is bad for anybody, but I personally try to reclaim words like that for myself because I have been called crazy a lot. I've been gaslit a lot. And you know, for me, it's like a joke. It's like an inside joke. And it's like, if I'm saying these things about myself in a way that is fun or whatever, it kind of takes the piss out of when someone might use those for me in a fit of temper, in a fit of anger or something. Because I'll be like, okay, okay, boyo. Because it's like, I've personally, it's my purpose to try to take the power over those highly negative words that are frequently used to invalidate people like me. So that when I do encounter them in the wild, um, it doesn't affect me as much. So I wouldn't say like it's okay to go around calling people like lunatics or calling people crazy or whatever. Absolutely do not do that. That's inappropriate. Um, but I do do it for myself in that joking way, for the reasons that I have said. Um, I don't know why I had to disclaim it like that. I just had this like compulsion to. um, but what am I going to talk about today? I suppose I could talk about some processing things I've done, other than like the EP or whatever. Um, I've mentioned before that I have some issues around the sleeping waking cycle, especially when another person is involved who may be trying to like wake me up or whatever. Um, and it's because like just to sum up, I don't want to go on that rant again. But just to sum up, like when I was a kid, I was basically trained to wake up a certain way, to perform tasks for someone or something. It was a very intense situation, and I have a lot of unresolved things around sleeping and becoming awake because of that. And I had a couple more incidents with that happen this week. There's my roommate, who I respect them very much for taking on the challenge of trying to wake me up when I have this silly, like, trauma response to being awakened. Um, they were trying to wake me up a couple of times because my sleep schedule has become backwards once more. And, they did some shit that triggered the hell out of me. Um, and like, I want to say this a whole bunch. It's not their fault that, that happened. Um, it's, the thing about trauma responses is that, like, I don't know, I don't think it's responsible to blame other people for triggering a trauma response unless they're, like, doing it on purpose, and it's usually pretty obvious when someone is doing it on purpose. But when it's just, like, banal, everyday things, and they're just, like, acting like humans about it, and it's triggering, it's like, it's not their responsibility to deal with. It's mine. And so I just want to, like I said, I wanted to reiterate that. So we had a couple incidents with that happening this week, and instead of doing the thing that I normally do, where I get real freaked out about it and completely shut off, my emotions and go robot, but be low-key panicking for like 6 hours, I decided, in the moment, to be like, oh my god, I'm freaked out now. That was horrible. I need to deal with something right now. And I like verbally said that as soon as it happened. And one of the times I was like, I'm gonna hide now for a little bit and try to deal with this. I will emerge when I am able. And you know what? I fucking did. I took that time. I stated what was going on. And in the privacy of my own little blanket cocoon, I had my emotions about it. And, there was still a certain amount of suppression. because it's like, I'm not trying to get hysterical as soon as I wake the fuck up, you know? Like, my throat hurts because my throat always hurts when I wake up because I'm always a dehydrated bitch. And it's like, I don't want to start, like, yelling. I don't want to. I, I just don't. I don't want it. So I do recognize that there's still a little bit of suppression going on, but I allowed myself to like think through what was going on, acknowledge the flashback that was happening, albeit in a slightly muted way. Um, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna think through this. I'm gonna recognize these thoughts that are happening to me. I'm gonna recognize where they're coming from, and I'm going to remind myself that I am in the present and this is not the scenario in which I find myself anymore. And it's like I I have a lot of trouble having a non-judgmental dialogue with myself because I perceive myself as being generally a very weak person. I perceive any moments of weakness as like it's this like confirmation bias thing where it's like, aha, I knew you were, insert negative adjective here. You can't even handle being awakened. And it's really silly. But I made a conscious effort, when these things happened, to not do that. And I think it was really good for me. Like, I don't know, that doesn't mean that I'm suddenly, like, cured or anything. And that, like, this specific thing is never going to bother me again. But I think it does mean that I am creating a habit that will help me to not be so affected by it in the future. Because it's like, the thing about emotions is that if you try to turn them off, or, turn them off, um, they're not, they're not, they're not really off. They just end up hiding. So the next time you feel those emotions, they're twice as strong because you didn't let them out the first time. So they just sort of bubble there until the next big thing. And it just builds and builds and builds and builds until eventually you can't contain it anymore. And it's just really unpleasant experience. So I'm trying to create habits that that will allow me to safely experience emotions when they pop up, especially the ones I have difficulty with. And even if I can't manage, the full scope of the emotions in the moment, I can still chip away at it. And that I think that's part of living a more healthy life. Because I don't know, I just have a lot of issues acknowledging emotions in a non-judgmental way. I, like, even happiness, like, if I catch myself being too happy, I'll be like, wow, that's cringe, bro, and immediately bring myself down until I'm in this, like, what I conceptualize as a neutral space, but is really passively negative. Because for some reason I think negativity is neutral. Um, so I can honestly say that I'm pretty proud of myself for responding the way that I did under stress. Because I usually don't. I was gonna make it a whole sentence, but I was like, usually I just don't. That's enough. um, but so that was pretty neat. It still sucks, and I'm still having hella sleep issues because I have been activated about that again, and that's like a whole mess. Like, okay, so when I personally get like triggered to a point where I actively notice that I am triggered and I'm forced to acknowledge that to myself. Or, like in this case, I choose to acknowledge it to myself. Um, I just like, I fixate so hard on it, and it is like, it makes this whole like routine happen of, of, avoidance kind of. So, like, like this thing with sleeping and waking up was really triggering for me. So my brain's all like, time to just avoid doing the sleep, because if you don't do the sleep, then you won't have to get woken up or wake up in a really shitty way. No problem. That's how you get rid of the problem. Let me just note down that I did another row so I don't lose track of where I am while I'm rambling. Okay, there we go. And I understand that's like a well documented symptom of PTSD is like extreme avoidance of a thing. But when it's like sleep, it's a little hard to mediate that, because it's like with a lot of things like let me use some kind of innocuous example. I don't know. I'll just make one up. I'll make one up instead of using a real one, because I don't have the bandwidth to use a real one. Say, for example, I got into like I had a close call while I was walking down the street with somebody like almost hitting me with their car or something. And my brain makes note of like the model of the car and everything. And then from then on, I have this dramatic avoidance of that kind of vehicle. Like, that's something that can pretty easily, not easily, but conceptually be worked around in a way. Like, there are loopholes to be found with that. Like, maybe after the initial incident, the avoidance procs, and it's like, all cars are the devil, I cannot stand them, I refuse to be around a vehicle. That's just like, that's not something that is necessarily possible, at least in the place that I live in. Um, and so, like, a way to kind of get around that would be like, well, okay, not every car is responsible for this feeling. It's just this one make and model of the car. So that would be a first step in dealing with the avoidance, right? Um, it's not a solution by any means, because it's like, what are you like, how do you avoid all the Hyundais in the world, right? You can't, and you're just kind of setting yourself up to get triggered if you lean into that avoidance. But what I'm saying is, like, you go from this massive pool of things to avoid to a very narrow pool of things to avoid. And then as you have experiences where the bad thing doesn't happen again, you can say, like, oh, well, it was really that driver that I probably need to avoid for safety reasons. Because, like, what are the odds that you're going to see that person again, right? Or whatever. So it's just about, like, narrowing and narrowing the pool of things you avoid until you're able to go out, quote unquote, normally, um, to, like, slowly turn off the hypervigilance that comes along with, like, huge avoidance issues and stuff, and be able to just kind of like navigate the world without that additional stress. But when it's something like waking up, like, what the fuck do you do? What the fuck do you do? Like, I can't just not wake up. It's a normal part of, like, how bodies work to have a sleep awake cycle. And so it's like, I, at this point in time, am not entirely able to just wake myself up whenever I want to. I have this thing about alarms where, like, if I. First of all, they scare the shit out of me because, loud noises while I am not conscious suddenly bringing me into consciousness. Like, that's a thing. Um, so, like, I will either get triggered by an alarm or I'll find an alarm that works out for me, and then within like 3 days or something, I just like I get so comfortable with it that I can just ignore it. Like I have a really hard time with alarms, and like I can't do the like tactile ones, like ones that like move around and shit, or like vibrate or whatever to wake you up, because that involves something touching me to wake me up, which is even worse than a loud noise waking me up. um, so like I don't know, I just like when I get into these cycles of weird sleeping hours that is impractical to keep and live a functional life, as I define it. um, like I really struggle um, with doing that myself. So I do need someone's help to get me up. And so like this whole like avoidance thing, I can't just be like, okay, well another person just won't wake me up, and that'll be how I kind of dupe the hypervigilance slash avoidance slash stress thing. I like that's just not an option for me, and I don't have like multiple roommates, so I can't just be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't wake me up for a while, and it should be this other person at least until I like calm the fuck down a bit. Like that's not an option for me either. Um, and it's like I can't just bring someone to my house to wake me up. First of all, it's like it's COVID time, so no. Second of all, um, nobody I know lives very close to me, and so it's like I don't know, these like little tricks that I've learned. Just like none of them seem to work for this whole waking up thing, so I'm forced to not try to trick it away and actually deal with it. Ugh. I, not gonna lie, I kind of hate it. Um, but I think it's been good for me because I do have to have a conversation with myself where I just like acknowledge what's happening, and I have to actively be patient with myself and work through it in the moment. And I think I've been moderately successful at doing that, even if it is still a little repressed. um, but so that's one thing. Um, I have all right. I'm gonna change the subject for a moment. Probably. Why did I say for a moment? I'm gonna change the subject. Um, when I wasn't on here for a month, I also ghosted like everyone in my life for maybe actually more than a month. Um, and because I was freaked out, and I covered that last time, so I'm not gonna rant about that again. But one of my pals has been trying to like do stuff with me online, like music related and everything, and I just like haven't been able to like I haven't had the bandwidth to deal with that for a while. Really nice person, love them a lot, really want to do this thing, but I'm just like I fucking can't. I finally messaged them like yesterday or something. And like the last thing they sent me was like, "Hope you're doing okay." And so I just sent back, "Nope." And I made an EP about it. It should be free to listen to. if it's not, let me know. And that was it. It was super awkward and like super blunt. Um, and like, but I felt like, so for the last like week or whatever, I've just been like, I can't justify messaging you until I have something to show for my absence. So I finally got this EP done, and I'm like, okay, good. I can do the messaging. I deserve to have this human contact again because I have something to show for my absence. And, but it was just like, I don't know. I think I said something like, I, I'm trying to quote myself. It's hard to remember what I said, but I think like, I was like, nope, bitches really be getting to me. So I made an EP about it. If you want to listen to it, it should be free. If it's not, let me know. And I put a link to it. and and I'm just like, well, that maybe could have gone a little better. I could have maybe been a little more articulate about it. But I'm like, whatever, what's done is done. I have replied, I have done the friendship thing. And then they saw my message almost immediately and they still haven't responded to me. And I'm like, I okay, first of all, I have to remind myself I literally like ghosted this person for like 2 months. I am not owed anything close to an immediate response from them. It's okay. It is okay. This anxiety you're feeling, this like abandonment dysphoria or whatever, is like it's a little irrational. Like they're the kind of person who would definitely listen to it and then give me their thoughts. But it's like they might be too busy to do it. They have a lot of things going on all the time. They like they'll get back to me at some point and it'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. And I'm just like freaking out over it cuz I don't know how to have healthy relationships with people. And it's like, oh no, I might have fucked it. Um, Again, have that like huge confirmation bias about like, I am just unlovable. There is something wrong with me. I can't communicate properly, and that's why nobody wants to be my friend. I just like have that going on in my brain. I'm just like, man, I'm working on being accepting. I'm working on being non judgmental about everything that's going on in there, but this is fucked. Can you just like stop? And that's been interesting. I've also been low key, like, really paranoid that, like, there's that person that I was talking about last time who was, like, super manipulative and how, like, they're mutual with this person. Um, I've been so worried that they've just been, like, talking trash to me about me with all of our mutuals. And, like, I haven't been around to, like, do anything about it. Um, because, like, I know that's what they do. Because it's like anytime they have an issue with anybody else, they would always tell me about it. And, like, be really toxic about how they talked about their issues with other people. So I wouldn't put it past them to have, like, talked mad shit about me while I was gone. Um, and it's like, I don't know how this person would take that. Like, they're pretty sensible, and we're friends. But I also haven't been the best friend because I have been very distant. I've been not able to keep up with things I want to do. Like, I'm like, let me listen, listen to your stuff. Um, I'll try to send you some of my stuff. Maybe we can collab, question mark. But then, like, all this shit happened with, like, toxic person A and, like, completely activated all of my trauma things about, like, collaborating on music with people. And I'm just like, I can't fucking deal with this. And I don't know how to communicate that that's what's going on with me. So it's like, in the absence of information from me, are they accepting bad information from toxic person A. I don't know. I don't know what to do about that if that's the case. Um, and it's like, I accept that I don't have control over that situation because I gave it up. Me trash talking myself. But like, it would just suck if things went south because I have this disabling thing happening to me. And that would be super lame. That would be super lame. But I do hope that they give me the benefit of the doubt a little bit. They like listen to my stuff and they can kind of see where I'm coming from a little bit. Because they're like super intuitive when it comes to music and everything. And I really feel like they would understand what I'm saying with it. They're also like genre agnostic, so they wouldn't be put off by how fucking random it sounds. um, but I don't know. Maybe like saying nope, bitches be getting to me. It wasn't really the appropriate thing to say after 2 months of no contact, you know. Um, but if needed, I can apologize. I can apologize. I can hope. I can maybe explain myself. We'll see. I'm a very private person, and it makes me really uncomfortable with like straight up saying to people like, "Lol, sorry, it's a trauma thing," and then like actually explaining what that means. Like I feel like I shouldn't have to do that. I feel like I shouldn't have to disclose that when I do like non-neurotypical things. I feel like I shouldn't have to go into that um, with anybody because I don't think it's any of their business. But at the same time, I think a good friend will be honest about like if things are going bad, why they're going bad. It's this really weird balance between like what is personal and what is private and then what is needed to facilitate a healthy social relationship. I don't understand healthy social relationships like at all. I feel like I'm totally just randomly doing things and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Um, and I just like I I have this notion that if I talk to people about my trauma responses, if I explain that I do, honestly, most of what I do because of trauma responses, then they're only gonna see me as that. They're only gonna engage with me as that. They're gonna define me as just like that one bitch who won't shut up about their trauma or whatever. Um, and it's like, oh, I feel a rant coming on. And I feel like part of that, I might have had this rant before. I'm sorry if I have. I'm probably going to have it more than once over the course of this because it's something that I think about a lot. And I don't, I don't have the words yet that I don't know how to talk about it without being like super offensive. So I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying in the hopes that I eventually figure out how to say what I am thinking appropriately. But anyway, I got so worried that I'm just gonna be conceptualized as, you know, that person who like doesn't shut up about their trauma or like makes it who they are or whatever. And it's like, I understand that for me, like, I have so much early childhood shit that happened that I know that it physically altered my brain. Like, when most kids are learning to, like, ride a bike or whatever, I was learning how to open pill bottles for people. I was, like, doing manual labor for them. Like, there's a lot of shit going on with me that is not part of the normative experience. So I learned how to learn in a completely different way. I learned how to interact with people in a very different way than most of my peers. Like, in some respects, all that I am revolves around this trauma thing because I didn't get to have a normative childhood, or developmental experiences. Um, like, my developmental experiences have all hinged around this thing, like these non-normative experiences that I've had. So, like, it is fair to say that I am defined by my trauma. And I don't know why there's such a prevailing narrative that, like, you don't have to be defined by that. And it's like, well, but I am. Like, part of coping and processing is learning that there is a better way to live and forming habits that are healthier for me. Um, I don't really care about doing the normative things, but I do care about being healthy. I care about being happy. And a lot of the patterns, belief systems, or whatever that I have developed through this whole trauma thing, they're not healthy for me. They don't help me be a functional, happy person. So that's why I work on them. That's why I try to communicate about them when I feel it is appropriate to do so. But because there's this whole thing on the fucking internet of people being like, I'm so traumatized and this is why I act like an asshole, and, like, they don't actually do the work to, like, the processing of that, then it's like there's this reputation. Like, look no further than the whole, like, triggered joke. It's like, it's funny to be like, huh, well, you're triggered. You're having this emotional reaction. And it's just like, it's just a fucking joke. Trauma is a fucking joke. It's, it's probably never been more visible than it is right now. Everyone knows the word trauma. Everyone apparently knows someone who is traumatized. But they have these weird fucking ideas about what that means, right? Like, trauma is a thing that happens when when you think you're gonna die. Like, when power is stripped completely from you, you're put in a fight or flight situation. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn are all included in that. I still just say fight or flight for the convenience of it. Um, like, when you're put into one of those situations that activates the full-on, like, limbic response in your brain, but then, like, that response isn't enough to save you. That's when trauma happens. It's not just like, this thing was so stressful, I'm traumatized now. Like, that's not what it means. That's not what it means. And I think I've I've looked around for information on this because I'm like, am I being a gatekeeper right now? Like, I'm trying not to be gatekeepy about trauma because it's like, I think anyone who thinks that they have experienced trauma deserves help, deserves validation, deserves the tools to be able to cope with it, to be able to get back to leading healthy, functional lives, free from the stress that having a trauma response, like, gives you. Like, I think this is difficult. But I think that trauma has become one of those, like, pop culture buzzwords that has lost its meaning to non-traumatized people. So like they could be like, I argued with my girlfriend. I am so traumatized. And it's like, well, okay, no. Like I don't want to deny the stress that arguing with a significant other causes. Like I know that that can be a horrible, horrible thing to go through, and that like there could be lasting emotional damage from arguing with a significant other. I understand that like at a certain point in like arguing that like abusive things do happen, and those have lasting impacts that do mimic trauma symptoms. Like there are like you can develop anxiety about it. You can get emotionally triggered when something similar begins to happen. You can have nightmares about it. Like all of these things that are like trauma symptoms can happen to somebody who goes through just a really stressful event. And from what I've seen, uh, that's a phenomenon that has caused like therapists and like the psychiatric community or whatever. They describe those kinds of things as like small t trauma, because it's like these people are experiencing symptoms and they should probably get help for those symptoms, because like nobody needs to live with that shit. But it's like there's such a difference in the order of magnitude of those symptoms between someone with like a small t trauma and someone with big T trauma, which is what I was talking about, where it's like you have a life threatening situation and your primal limbic response isn't enough to save you from it. Like having that experience is a big T trauma. And I think that those two like categories of thing, like I feel like that should be something that's more widely recognized, because it's like I've had conversations with people where I'll be like talking about a big T trauma, um, and the thing people do where it's like you talk about yourself and they just like want to talk about themselves forever afterwards. They'll be like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. I had small T trauma happen to me, and it really messed me up for a while. And I'm just like, uh-huh, okay, great, love that. I did another row. Good for me. Um, and it's like, I don't want to get the wrong thing across. Like, I don't think we should be having dick measuring contests about trauma. Like, this is more severe than you. Than yours. Don't fucking talk to me about your shit. Like, I'm not that kind of person. But if I'm talking about how, like, I'm gonna use a little bit of a graphic example here, okay? So, like, if you get real bothered about graphic statements about domestic abuse, maybe skip ahead about 45 seconds to a minute, right? Okay? Ready? Ready. Like I'll do a thumbs up when I'm done making the really graphic example. I'll make a thumbs up. Um so it's like you're having a conversation with someone and you'll be talking about how it's like, oh yeah, last night I was woken up in the middle of the night by my dad busting in with a machete and like beating the shit out of my mom. Uh, and they're just, and they're just like, oh yeah, my mom and dad fight like all the time. They argue and it's like super loud and it keeps me from sleeping. And they would like call that a trauma, like a big T kind of trauma. And it's like, it is super stressful when people you care about are like fighting in front of you, it's even worse when it's impacting your ability to like sleep or even like maybe eat sometimes, do the basic human things. Um, but it's just like there's such a fundamental difference between those experiences that I think it's become so culturally ingrained in us by how people so casually talk about it on the internet. Like, we're supposed to ignore those differences. And if you try to point out those differences, then you're seen as gatekeeping. You're seen as invalidating. And it's just like, no, I need you to understand that while we may have similar experiences, these experiences are not the same. And my symptomology is very different from yours because of it. Like, I can understand, and in that situation with the examples that I gave, it's like, I can easily understand where that other person is coming from. I can easily understand the kind of response they're having to it and everything. But the reverse is not true. Because, like, unless, I don't know, it's never true. So, I, I have this issue where people are like, there was this stressful thing, now I am traumatized. And it's like, trauma does not equal just like stress. There's there's a magnitude to it that's like, I don't know, it's like that I find for a lot of mental illnesses. Like, somebody will be nervous about something and they'll be like, I have anxiety. It's like, well, no, you don't have anxiety, you're nervous. Like, people who have anxiety, I don't know, it's about extent. It's about magnitude. It's about the ways in which it affects your life. Like, in the example I gave, like, someone whose parents just argue and it keeps them awake because they do it at god awful hours of the day or something, like, they're gonna they're gonna be dealing with symptoms of stress. They're gonna be dealing with potentially sleep deprivation. They might feel a little bit of fear and uncertainty because they don't know where the argument is going to end or something. But, like, in a normative scenario, an argument is the beginning and end of it. Like, there might be a divorce, and there are certain elements of divorce that I think can be traumatic. But, like, stress does not equal trauma. And it's so hard to communicate that to people in this culture of validate me or else. Like, with the example that I gave, the more extreme one, it's like, that's going to be something that causes me to have full body flashbacks. That's something that's going to give me night terrors. That's something that's going to affect my ability to sleep long term. That's something that's going to, there's going to be a whole sense of like sensory triggers for that experience. And it will impact my day-to-day functioning. Source, I know that's me, that's my experiences. Um, and it's just like, you can't really communicate with non-traumatized people who feed into this whole like validate or bust culture. Like, you can't try to explain that to them without them getting really mad at you, At least not that I've met. And it's so damaging. It's so damaging. So it creates this, and then the people who feed into that are like, they're the people who talk about their small t trauma and like a lot, and they use it as like a get out of jail free card type thing, where it's like they'll be acting like a shitty person, and they're like, "Oh, so sorry, I'm traumatized. I can't help it." Um, and it's like, well, okay, your trauma does not excuse bad behavior. Sorry. And so people get so used to like hearing that kind of bullshit that we like, I think, intuitively know is bullshit, even if it's rude to call it that. Like, they get so used to hearing that. So when someone is like, hey, I'm having a trauma response right now, they hear that and they have this like preconceived notion of what that means from these people who've never experienced a big T trauma. Like, they're like, oh, okay, so you're just gonna be a fucking asshole now. Like, just, and then, and it's like, well, no, that's not what a trauma response is. Like, I've had moments where I'm hanging out with people and I would suddenly just get really triggered. This hasn't happened in a very long time because I am much better at management now. But there would be times where like I would be hanging out with people and something would happen and I would get triggered and I would freak the fuck out as one does. And they would be legitimately afraid because they've never seen something like that before. And it's like, all right, let me calm down, let me explain it to you, let me comfort you. And I would be like, lol, that was a full-blown trauma response. And they're like, what? That's what that means? I thought trauma response was X, Y, or Z. And it's like, no, that's a stress response. Like, there's a difference. And I don't think it's inappropriate to point that out. I really don't. And I think, like, most of the reason I'm so afraid to mention when something that I do is fueled by a trauma response is that people are going to read that. Are going to read that in, like, the pop culture way. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening. Like, I should not have ghosted my friend for as long as I did. I know that I can accept responsibility for that. I was not regulating myself properly. I was not communicating properly, and that was probably very hurtful to them. And if we end up talking about it, which I would like to, and I don't know how to initiate it, like, if it comes down to it, I'll be like, I am sorry that I did a hurtful thing. If, I would like to explain my behavior if that's okay. Like, I was having this response and I was not regulating properly when I had this response, and it took me a very long time to get to a point where I felt like I could talk to people again. And, like, I hope you can forgive that that's what happened. So it's like, I don't use my shit as a way to skirt responsibility. I think, if anything, the fact that I have these non-normative responses to things, like, I think it gives me a greater responsibility to be mindful, to be engaged, to do all of these things. But, like, the pop culture experience of it is like, let me use this to get out of trouble. Let me use this as a tool in my toolkit. And I just can't fucking stand it. I hope all of that made sense. Like I said, it's something that I've thought about for a really long time, and I really struggle to find appropriate words for it. I'm like, cause I'm not a doctor or anything. I can't, like, explain objectively the clinical criteria for, what is or is not trauma or anything like that. But like from what I do know, it's like I don't know, I just have to use what I know. And I have this observation that keeps happening. And I just don't I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to deal with it cuz it's so fucking hard to talk about this stuff. Like it's so hard to talk about my own experiences anyway because they are so non-normative and it can be difficult for people to hear things about my life, and I understand and respect that. It's very far outside of their experience. They have no frame of reference for like computing what exactly I'm saying a lot of the time. That's cool. I understand. But it's like, in addition to that, I am very aware that so many people have this filter on of like other people who talk about trauma in a certain way. There's like this overwhelming cultural thing about trauma. It's probably more visible now than it's ever been, which is good to an extent. But it's like, what is visible? You know? What exactly is visible? You have this like one camp of people who are like, only war vets get PTSD. Um, and they might make an exception for like various assault survivors. And they're like, anyone else other than this group of people is Tumblr triggered and fake or whatever. And like, because it's become such a fucking buzzword, trauma, it's like if you try to speak up and say like, hey, the stress that you've experienced is not a trauma, it is very stressful for you, and I validate that. And I think you could make use of certain coping skills that like overlap with like how I do things, but it's like your stress was not a trauma. They're gonna be like, oh, you gatekeeper. They're gonna conflate you with those people who try to claim that only soldiers get PTSD. They're gonna be like, oh, you're just saying I'm Tumblr triggered. Like, you're such a piece of shit. And it's like, nah, dude. I just think we should be really honest about our experiences and like recognize that because something is really stressful for you doesn't mean that it just doesn't mean that it's a trauma. It just doesn't. Like I kind of wish that I'd gotten a psychology degree so that I could like explain why I feel so strongly about this more eloquently. Um but it's just like I think we as a culture are too comfortable using disability words frivolously. Um like I'm guilty of that. I'm not saying like I'm exempt from this or anything. I catch myself all the time using language that is inappropriate, and I'm working on that. So like I understand like how it's hard for people cuz it's hard for me too. Like I'll say like I'm trying to really work on not saying stuff that's really offensive to people with cognitive disabilities. Um or like or like it's a thing where if you don't hear someone properly, someone will be like, "What are you, deaf?" LOL. And it's like that's not a funny thing. Some people are just like deaf. Just because you didn't hear something doesn't mean you have that disability. And I don't think anyone has a right to make fun of that disability or treat it in a trivial way or like use it only to describe like bad things, because disabled people aren't bad. Like, the disability can be inconvenient, that's for damn sure. And I think it's up to each individual to decide for themselves whether they think the disability is bad. But, like, a person with a disability, like, is not automatically bad. And these language choices we make just kind of reinforce that, disability is bad. Um, I don't know. It feels a little uncomfortable for me to participate in disability discourse, um, even though I am a disabled person, because I struggle a lot with acknowledging that I am a disabled person. Like, I have a condition that frequently disables me. It frequently makes me unable to do the things that I want or need to do. Um, I like that's it's just a fact of my life. But there's so much shit that goes along with saying, like, I am disabled, using the word disabled for oneself, that I kind of feel like I have some resistance to it on that basis. And then also, like, I don't know, the word disabled is such this overwhelmingly, like, negative thing in pop culture that it's like, if I feel like if I'm not in a hospital or, like, bedridden, like, 24/7 or whatever, like, if I call myself disabled, am I faking? Am I doing it for attention? Um, like, there's this hella imposter syndrome that comes along with, like, me using that word for myself, even though I understand that it's, like, objectively true, if objectivity were a thing, which I am not convinced of. But I don't know. I just, like, I feel like I should be able to just very bluntly say, like, I am disabled, and not have to have all these weird connotations to it. But anyway, back to let's not use disability words frivolously. Like, just because someone doesn't see something doesn't mean that they are blind. If they are blind, that's not a negative thing, and we should probably make it so that, you know, blind people have better accommodations so that they can, like, do the things that they want to do in this world that is created for sighted people. Like, maybe instead of, like, poking fun at that, we should put that energy into making a more accessible world. Like, I don't know. I would like to be more involved in disability justice. I have a lot of internalized stuff to get over with respect to that before I, enter those spaces, probably, because I don't want to bring my baggage for other people to have to deal with. But it's one of those things that I feel so strongly about. And I think it all begins with proper education of, like, what things are, like, what they mean. Because, like, there's so much information available on the internet, but there's not a lot available to contextualize that information for people. And, like, not everyone is an autodidact. Not everyone knows how to teach themselves properly and how to, like, cultivate understanding for themselves without the help of another person. Like, I love librarians. I think librarians are a gift, because it's like it's their job to, like, help cultivate that understanding for just, like, random shit that people want to know. Um, uh, but, like, people don't like to avail themselves of that resource because it's like, oh, the stuffy librarian or whatever. When, like, librarians are actually super chill people most of the time, and they, like, really enjoy actually helping people. Um, but it's just like the DSM-5, for example, is just like on the internet. So people can just like look at that and they'll see like trauma symptoms, for example, like nightmares, flashbacks, whatever, and they like their frame of reference determines how they interpret those symptoms. Like they'll read what a flashback is and they will think that suddenly recalling a memory when a stimulus happens, they'll think like, "Oh, that's a flashback." And it's like, "Well, no, that's memory recall." There is a difference between memory recall, even memory recall that's provoked by a stressful thing, and a flashback. Like, you don't like it, but it's so hard. It is so hard to have that conversation with people who are convinced that like they've read the information, it applies to them. If you say otherwise, you are ableist, you are invalidating, you are this, that, and the other thing. When it's like, I know for a fact that you don't have flashbacks, or people who have nightmares and they call them night terrors. And it's like, okay, can you like explain to me what you experience? And they're like, man, I had a really bad dream. I think I'm having night terrors. And it's like, I don't want to play down the effect that the nightmare had on this person because it was stressful for them. And they deserve to get the help and accommodations that they need to be able to deal with that in a healthy way. But I think, I don't know, it's so inappropriate to call a nightmare a night terror because you read it and your frame of reference dictates that you have experienced enough distress or whatever for it to qualify. Or I think part of it actually has to do with the fact that like in order to get help, in order to get heard or to get accommodations, like you have to you have to use extreme language, especially for mental health issues. Like you have to, like if you are nervous about something and you try to tell someone you're nervous about something, they'll be like, just get over it, right? So it's like, okay, well, I have to escalate this because I'm not getting the help I need and it's making me more freaked out. I'm going to tell you I have an anxiety disorder. So maybe you'll take me seriously. And it's like, can't we just like take people seriously when they describe what's actually going on the first time? Like if someone's nervous, like it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to be like, okay, what's going on? Like why are you nervous? Like walk me through it. And then they, tell you about what they're feeling and then you try to like help them work through it. A lot of times like it just doesn't take too much time or effort to be kind to people. But instead there's this like whole like mental health things aren't real. You should just be able to stop. So people feel, I guess, compelled to make a mountain out of a molehill, even though I hate that expression. And it seems like a really asshole thing for me to say. I don't know. It's such a difficult thing to talk about. Because it feels like I've been gaslit about this, and that's, like, I'm getting the same feeling trying to talk about this as I do when I'm talking to someone who gaslights me. It's like, I've just been told so many times that I am a piece of shit for having these opinions, but it's just like, this is something that I live through. This is something that almost daily affects my ability to get help. This is something that almost daily impacts my ability to communicate with people effectively. Like, this is something that has had lasting consequences for the way I live my life. Like, I've seen this shit happen so much. And I've been told so many times, like, no, that's not what's really happening. You're just an asshole. Um, I don't know. I didn't expect to rant about that for that long, but I guess I did. I'm gonna probably finish up this row and call it for today, because I've just kind of made myself sad thinking about this stuff. Um, but just sort of dissociate into the knitting. Let's fucking go, right? Um, I probably, man, I'm probably not gonna get my knit 2 purl 2 nice little like row thing going on, because I just keep screwing it up. I'm just like, oh, I'll do 3 this time, I think, even though it's supposed to be 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. Because I just like, it's so hard to keep track of it. And like, there's this tactile thing with knitting where like you can usually kind of tell if you're on a knit or a purl by the like resistance or whatever. I don't know. There's just like, there's a textile thing that can help guide where you should be, like, in your like knit 2 purl 2, knit 3 purl 1, like whatever. Like, it just feels different depending which stitch you're supposed to do. But I'm just like, what is having a body? What is processing sensations? Well, and I'm just like, I'm like, you can't see my face, but I just like, I'm staring so hard at this, trying to like keep on track, and I just inevitably get off, like frequently, actually. Um, hmm. I might, once I stop recording here, I might go ahead and make some more progress on this, just so that, like, next time I'm doing something different. And also, to be honest, I'm in a really, like, I'm in a mood for sewing, and I feel like picking up my sewing projects again. Um, so, I might, I might just make a little more progress on this, so that maybe next time I'll be doing something different than screwing up my ribbing. And maybe we'll see. But sorry. So thanks for checking in with me. I appreciate it if you're watching this. Um, I should make a plan next time so that I don't just do this again. But then that seems really contrived. I don't know. I'll think about it. I'll think about it while I'm away. But thanks for tuning in. Means a lot. I'll see you next time.